Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Eleni Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Welcome. We have a special guest today, Deena Thompson.
Woohoo!
And we've had her on before, and she is a genius. And you revolutionized, Deena, my breakfast. At the time, it was intermediate fasting, right? Intermittent fasting that we talked about. And you adjusted my breakfast even from that conversation. And today we're going to dive deep into the best breakfast. So I'm ready for you to ramp up my breakfast even more.
Yes. Welcome back, Deena. Fun fact, Deena, you are the first repeat guest we've ever had on this show.
Oh,
I feel so honored.
Yes.
It does mean we like you. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that was exciting. So for those of you who remember, Deena was my classmate. We both went to the University of Bridgeport together, got our master's in human nutrition together. Deena is just a brilliant, she was a brilliant student. She's a brilliant nutritionist all around. And you're also a registered dietitian as well, right? I saw that from your email. So all around, just a brilliant nutritional specialist.
Yes.
So we're excited to have you on, Deena. And Deena's focus and specialty tends to be in time-restricted eating or fasting and how to do that in healthy, simple ways, which I love. So we had a whole episode with Deena kind of revolutionizing.
It was good.
Intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating.
Go back and listen to it.
Exactly. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and make sure you listen to it. It's one of our favorite episodes, which is why Deena is back here today. And today, Deena is going to talk to us about eating a better breakfast.
Yes, that's right.
Dare I say the best breakfast?
The best.
Exactly. Yes. And this is a topic that I'm super passionate about because it's just one of those things that if you can nail your breakfast, everything else gets better as a result of that. And I'm sure we'll dive into why that is, but it's just such a simple tool and it really sets the stage for the rest of the day. So it's like, if you can only nail one meal a day, make it this one.
Yes.
Preach. I love it. Start your day right.
Well,
I love
tell us, Deena, just since we're right here, why is breakfast important?
Yeah. And there are actually a lot of reasons that breakfast is really important, but one of them is that breakfast is when the morning time is the best time to be eating. So your digestion works better in the morning. Your blood sugar is more stable in the morning. You're the most insulin sensitive in the morning. So like if there's any time of day to eat food, it's in the first half of the day when the sunlight's really bright. We have our hormones are just like working for us. Our digestion is working at its best. And so it's like the best time to be putting fuel in the tank. And of course, what type of fuel we put in the tank matters, but breakfast is just like biologically, it's a great time for us to be eating. And it really sets us off on the right foot for the whole day. So that's one reason. Another is that breakfast eaters have the best appetite regulation and the lowest level of hunger hormones. So you just have a much more regulated appetite. You're not as ravenous. You're not as prone to cravings or like late night snacking or that kind of thing when you eat the right kind of breakfast. So like I said, it can just like have this positive domino effect on the whole rest of the day.
That's amazing. I will share my own personal testimonial, which is I was practicing intermittent fasting before we had that episode with Deena.
Yes.
And I was not skipping breakfast per se, because I was more intentional than that, but I wasn't eating until maybe like 11 o'clock in the morning. So usually about 5 hours after I had gotten up. And Kay was eating breakfast before that episode and she was like, oh no, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting and I'm going to find out why I'm doing it all wrong because I eat breakfast. But after that episode, Deena convinced me to eat breakfast. And we'll talk about that in a minute, when the best time to eat breakfast is to eat breakfast. And I felt like I started sleeping better.
Yes.
I felt much better. My energy was better.
Yes.
And not that my goal was to lose weight, but it did help with that process too, where I'd felt like my weight was kind of stuck and I just wanted it to budge a little bit.
Yeah.
And then changing my eating window totally shifted that in my favor.
Yes.
And now that I'm pregnant,
really powerful.
Yeah, really. It revolutionized our mornings. Like, it's wild.
Now that I'm pregnant, like eating a hearty breakfast and doing my best to keep the principles in mind that Deena talked about then that we're going to talk about today, I feel so much better doing that. In the mornings that I've like the occasional morning I've had to skip breakfast because I have like an early appointment or I'm fasting for blood work or something like that. I feel so trashed the rest of the day. Like now I feel so spoiled because I'm like, when I skip breakfast, I'm like, oh, I just feel bad. Like I just don't have the same energy. I'm hungry for more like snacky type foods.
Yeah. And that experience, like that bears out in the scientific research. So we know that breakfast skippers have higher cortisol levels in the morning and throughout the rest of the day. So you're going to have, and cortisol is a stress hormone. Like we love cortisol. It gets us up in the morning. It gets us going. It's meant to be high in the morning, but it's also, you know, in excessive amounts promotes weight gain, especially around the middle, and just makes us feel really frazzled and like, you know, wired and tired kind of a feeling. And breakfast skippers have higher cortisol levels all day long. So you're just like making your body feel stressed, even though, you know, you may not have more stress going on in your life. Physiologically, you're going to have a stronger stress response and higher stress hormones throughout the day when you skip breakfast. So that can really impact your energy. And then like you mentioned about cravings, people who skip breakfast tend to have more cravings and they tend to be carb cravings. So it's the breads, the sugars, the pretzels, the chips, the cookies, you know, all our favorite things.
Yep. This is awesome permission for me because I always eat breakfast because I'm starving in the morning and I need it. But I always felt guilty, like Elaine said, because like all the cool kids are in the 5 a.m. club and they don't eat breakfast until later. And I always thought, okay, well, I'm lazy and because I sleep till 6:30 and then I don't, you know, I eat breakfast right away. So now I'm indulgent. And now it's like, no, you brought to us the biological clock and the rhythm of the day. And I'm actually doing it well and right for my body. So thank you for giving me permission to be me, Deena.
Yes. You are so welcome.
So tell us, Deena, when is the best time of day or like the best time for breakfast?
Oh yeah.
According to our circadian rhythm, like what's the best way to optimize that and why?
And that is such a great question. There is some variability and flexibility. So when it comes to optimizing for stress hormones, then we see that eating within about 2 hours of waking up is, if you go beyond that, that's when the stress hormones tend to kind of continue to rise. So that is a really good number to go off of. So you don't have to like jump out of bed and eat breakfast. A lot of people don't feel really hungry right away, and that's normal. And it's also normal to wake up hungry, you know, and want to eat right away. Both of those are options. So there is a lot of flexibility. And I know like for me, I like to exercise in the morning and I'm not about to do that on a full stomach.
Right.
So, you know, it's nice to be able to go for my morning walk and then have breakfast. So that 2 to 3 hours, I would say 2 hours for most people. And then if somebody's like really experienced with fasting, they have great metabolic health, really good blood sugar stability, then you could possibly extend it a little longer. But really, we want it to be within kind of that 2 hour window is kind of more optimal for just sending your body that signal of safety and also revving up your metabolism for the day, which gets your energy going and also helps with weight loss. So
awesome.
That's awesome.
I will speak also to the blood sugar control. I can't remember. Had we done the keto episodes before we interviewed Deena or after?
Oh, I don't remember.
I think after.
It might have been, it was close within that time frame. Whenever we did do the keto episodes, I was checking my blood sugar daily all the time and it wasn't great. And I had to work really hard to keep it balanced. And I will say I just did, instead of doing like the typical pregnancy glucose tolerance test in the third trimester where you have to drink a sugary drink, my midwife team let me just check my blood sugar after like 3 times a day after every meal for 3 days, which was my choice, even though it was more tedious because I was like, well, if I have to change something about my diet, like I'd rather know what my body is doing in response to food I eat as opposed to what it would do if I drank a sugary drink, which I have not done for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't really need to know what my body does after I do that. I want to know what my body does after I eat food. Anyway, my blood sugars were like fantastic, like better than they've ever been.
Yeah.
And I think it's because since becoming pregnant, I've been much more diligent about eating breakfast every day because otherwise I wasn't getting enough protein. And so I was really like, I have to eat breakfast. I have to eat it early enough in the day that I'm not too full for other meals, because that was a real thing. If I eat breakfast too late, I was too full for lunch. So I was like usually skipping one meal a day. Anyway, and my blood sugar was the best it's ever been. So I was like, I think it's because I'm eating breakfast and I eat so much protein for breakfast.
Okay. Speaking of the protein, remind us, because you did say this on the last podcast, but what is the type of foods that you would recommend for breakfast to have specifically our blood glucose levels feeling good?
Yeah. So almost none of your typical breakfast foods.
In America.
Not cereal, not pancakes, not waffles, not, even a lot of the fruit-based smoothies that people make, right? So, and the reason for this is you have the most insulin, you're the most insulin sensitive in the morning. So you're actually really sensitive and very responsive to carbohydrates. So if you're going to have carbohydrates at breakfast, you want to make sure they're whole food sources. So fruits, vegetables, beans. And then if it's whole grain based, like an oatmeal or something like that, that's an okay option, but you've got to have the protein with it and you've got to have more fiber in that meal. So the best breakfast is going to be protein and fiber focused. That's really where it's at. Protein is really going to help. Well, both of those are actually really going to help with blood sugar stability, and making sure that you don't have like a spike in your blood sugar, that it just is like a nice rolling hill. And that energy sustains you for a long time. So protein is really satiating and it helps with blood sugar stability. And fiber helps slow down the digestion of a meal so that your breakfast keeps you full for 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours. If you've got enough protein and fiber at breakfast, it should carry you to lunch, no problem. Like if we're needing snacks in between, that's just a sign that your meal wasn't adequate, didn't have enough protein, didn't have enough fiber. If 10 o'clock, you're like, I need another cup of coffee or I need a snack or something like that. So protein and fiber, which is not our typical breakfast foods. So one thing that I think is really helpful is to just banish the whole idea that there are foods that you're supposed to eat for breakfast. I routinely will have a salad for breakfast or a bowl of soup for breakfast or leftover dinners for breakfast. Like it's just the first meal of the day, and it can be any food, And so when we kind of let go of this idea that it has to fit in this like box of this is what's okay for breakfast, then it opens up a lot more options, and we can have meat and we can have fish and we can have eggs, which are fantastic sources of protein. And we can have, nuts and seeds and things like that. It doesn't always have to be your typical breakfast foods. And at least in America, typical breakfast foods are, desserts.
Yeah, seriously. Well, those ideas sound amazing. I do with, okay, what's your opinion on this? My kiddos, we used to have cereal for the kids, right? Most days. And then since having this podcast and like Deena, you would be an influence on this. I changed my kids to, we're doing more oatmeal. We're doing more like protein with it and a lot of eggs when we can. But I'm still kind of a hard in the morning, kind of a, mornings are hard. You know what I'm saying? But I've started doing more French toast because each piece of bread has 2 eggs on it and the bread. Is that okay? I mean, I could do a little better, throw some bacon. Deena, am I in trouble for this or is that okay?
You're not in trouble. I think when it comes to something like French toast, it's all about the quality of the ingredients, right? I mean, you could buy Wonder Bread and make French toast, or you could buy like a whole grain sourdough bread and make French toast. And those are going to have a very different effect on your kids' blood sugar and just on how you feel. So really, when we're talking about focusing on protein and fiber is going to come from whole grains. And so if you're choosing a whole grain, like a sprouted wheat bread or a sourdough bread, or if you can't have wheat, then like a gluten-free, but one that's whole grain, that's not made out of like tapioca starch. You know, there's a way to do it where you just focus on quality. And I would aim for, you know, a piece of bread that has at least like 3 or 4 grams of fiber in it. 3 to 5 is probably typical for like a high fiber bread. And then you've got the eggs and the milk. If you're using dairy milk, it's going to be high protein. If you're using a plant milk, then they're usually not. But there are some plant milks out there, like Ripple has one, and there's like flax milk. There's some that are like a little bit higher in protein. And I have a Better Breakfast guidebook, and it has a ton of resources in it for people. So, but you can kind of like upgrade it, right? You can upgrade that French toast. So if you're using a whole grain bread and a quality milk, then you're actually going to have a decent amount of protein in there. You're probably getting, you know, 5 grams from the slice of bread and another 8 from a glass of milk, you know, so it's actually pretty good. And then it's toppings, right? What toppings are we putting on it? If we're choosing high fiber berries or fruits that are high in fiber and not as high in sugar, that's going to be much more blood sugar friendly. You put peanut butter or almond butter on there, that's going to add protein and fiber. So there's actually a lot of ways to make some of your favorite breakfast foods really more blood sugar friendly and more ideal. And in my breakfast workshop and guidebook that I've got, I have a pancake recipe that uses cottage cheese and oats and eggs. And so it's like high in protein, high in fiber, you know, and like the French toast example. So there's ways to do it that can really make it work. And then you can still have your favorite foods.
I love that.
That
and
sounds
now
amazing.
I am going to try to like upgrade. We do have gluten-free, and then I do like pasture raised eggs. We do almond milk. So I made some of those adjustments, but to add like the fruit and the peanut butter on it, that sounds amazing. I'm going to do that.
We do that.
And yogurt.
Yogurt. I'm like, my husband likes to make
Yogurt.
waffles on the weekend. That's kind of our
he just made it with, was it like coconut flour or what
it's
kind
a
of flour?
blend. It's a gluten-free flour blend. So it has flax meal in it and brown rice flour and
it looked amazing.
Something else I can't remember. It's like one of the better blends I could find. Otherwise, I just like using almond flour, coconut flour. But we do that, and then we put almond butter on it. I do a little bit of honey, since we did our honey episode or our sweetener episode where we talked all about honey being one of the better sweeteners. I do blueberries. Sometimes I'll do like sprinkles of coconut. Sometimes I'll do sprinkles of flaxseed meal. It's
as like a
good
treat. Like,
and that's our weekend breakfast, right? So I think like Deena's saying, there's ways to make your favorite breakfast foods like upgraded and even better. But even then, it's still a good idea to kind of reserve those things, I think, for weekends. But
the special.
But tell us, Deena, like, so what is the right amount of protein? What is the right amount of fiber to have for a breakfast? And then what might that look like? So however much fiber, like how does that translate into fruits and vegetables? How much should people be eating? And then proteins too.
And what do you think about having fat with it as well?
Yeah, great questions. So when it comes to protein, everybody's needs are going to be a little bit different, but I think a really good number to aim for is 30 grams of protein. And it might be a little bit higher if you're male or if you're super active or you just have a really tall or larger body, then you might have a higher protein need. And then if you're, really petite and small, then maybe a little bit less. But this 30 grams of protein is kind of a really good baseline and threshold, and especially important at breakfast to get your protein. I think we can get away. It's always important to prioritize protein at any meal, but it's like breakfast is probably the most important one to get protein in. And that's because it will really rev up your metabolism and stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which we want. We want our body to be in a state where it's building muscle, because that revs up our metabolism. We're burning more calories. We have more energy. We feel more alert and awake and alive and just like invigorated and that 30-gram threshold is kind of like what triggers it and turns it on. So if we get only 20, like that's better than 5, absolutely. But getting to that 30-gram mark is really helpful for feeling the most stable, for maximizing blood sugar stability, and for triggering that muscle protein synthesis where your body's in an active building mode, which turns up the calorie burning and the metabolism, and you just feel more energized. So that's what I'd say about protein. Now with fiber, I try to get my clients to aim for at least 10 grams of fiber at breakfast, which might sound like a lot because the average in America, I think, is 11 grams for the whole entire day.
Believe that.
So I'm asking people to get all, as much fiber as they might be typically eating in a whole day, like get that at breakfast and get that at every meal, right? 30 grams of fiber a day is probably a pretty good benchmark for most people to aim for. So getting that at breakfast is really important. And that amount of fiber is going to help with making the meal last, right? Keeping you full for a long time, contributing to satiety. And then it allows the sugar from the meal, which comes from, the carbohydrates that we eat. It's not that you're eating sugar, but just the carbohydrates in oats or in the bread that you're eating or whatever, the vegetables, the fruits that you're eating. It allows that energy to trickle out really slowly so that we have like a really steady and long lasting energy from that meal rather than like a surge and a crash, which is what so many of us experience, especially our poor kids.
Yeah. So what does like 10, 11 grams of fiber, how does that translate into like fruits and veggies? What does that typically look like? And same for the protein.
Yeah. So if you select for some higher fiber fruits, then we'd be going for things like berries, pomegranate, kiwis, anything that has like edible seeds in it is going to be high in fiber. Anything that has a skin that you can eat, an apple, a pear, right? Those tend to be higher fiber foods. And you're probably with berries, I think like raspberries have like 8 grams of fiber in like a cup, or maybe 3/4 of a cup or something like that. So like a handful, what I would eat, I'd eat a cup of raspberries.
Oh yeah, I could easily do that.
Yes.
They're pretty easily there with something like blackberries or raspberries or strawberries. You can get there pretty quickly. Other really great sources of fiber are going to be your seeds. So chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. They're fantastic sources of fiber and good sources of protein. So you're getting both at the same time with those. Hemp seeds are another one, really great. And they're so easy to sprinkle on, a yogurt parfait, or even like sprinkle on your pancakes or add to a bowl of cereal. If you're like, well, we're doing cereal, but we're going to try this out, right? This situation.
We're just doing it.
They're really soft. They're really easy to mix into things. So seeds are fantastic to have. And I think one thing that's really easy to do is to grind up flax seeds and chia seeds and even hemp seeds. Like you can get those 3, grind them up in your blender, or if you have like a coffee grinder, and put it in a jar in the fridge or the freezer. Once they're ground up, they need to be in the fridge or the freezer. But then you can just add a tablespoon of that to your pancake batter. You can add it to the yogurt parfait that you made, or whatever you're eating, and you're going to get, probably 8-9 grams of fiber from just that tablespoon.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's some simple ways to do it, and the seeds are fantastic. And then to Kay's question about what about fat? We want healthy fat at our meal, and that's really important for blood sugar stability. The reason I don't focus on it is just because if you get protein and fiber and you get them from whole foods, the fat comes along for the ride. So high fiber foods, nuts, seeds, not fruits and vegetables, but your nuts and seeds are high in fat. And then all of your whole food protein sources, meat, fish, eggs, have fat with them. So it's kind of like, it just comes along for the ride. And when we choose whole foods, the ratios are kind of already perfectly there for us. We don't have to think about it. And then choosing whole, I think full fat, if you're eating dairy products, choosing full fat dairy products like a whole milk yogurt or a whole milk cottage cheese or ricotta, whatever you're using at your breakfast is a great way to get the protein and the fat in the right ratios that Mother Nature put them together in.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
That's awesome. You have such a good, healthy outlook on like eating and feeling good and like your energy. I'm like inspired to go eat my right ratios for breakfast. You're doing great.
Yeah. And Mother Nature kind of made them for us. It's, we get in our heads about low fat or low carb and cutting this out and cutting that out. But like when you just build your meal with whole foods, it kind of comes the way it should. And it satisfies us and keeps us full, like all the right things are there. So
and I get this question a lot from my clients, so I'm passing it on to you, Deena. What about for people who never seem to have time to like make breakfast, right? I get this a lot, like, well, I don't have time to make breakfast. What would you say about that? What are some strategies for still having a healthy breakfast when your schedule is limited? And I get it, because people have kids, they're focusing on getting their kids out the door to school. Maybe they want to work out in the morning and then they need to get their kids packed up, then they need to get their own stuff packed up. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
What do people with busy schedules, how can they manage a better breakfast? And what are some like good quick breakfast options that have those right ratios of protein and fiber in them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one is that I think, we make time for the things that are important. And I think breakfast is important. And it's not that you have to spend more time cooking, but like I would take more time preparing breakfast than dinner maybe, because it's like the meal that's going to set you and your kids up for the best, feeling the best that day and making the best food choices naturally, because you're just coming from a place of my, appetite's regulated, my blood sugar's regulated, my energy feels really good. And we make the best food choices from that place, right?
I love that paradigm shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge shift.
So I think just actually prioritizing breakfast, I think there can be a little bit of a mind shift that could be helpful. Just like, this is a really important meal and we're going to take the time to cook it. If that's not an option for you, which I get that it's not for a lot of people, then preparing it the night before can be helpful. And also there are some really quick and easy options out there as far as like, how long does it take to scramble an egg? Like 2 minutes, that is not a really tough, and like to put sprouted wheat bread in the toaster and like scramble an egg and then add greens to it. Right. And then, so this is a really common breakfast for our family. Pretty much every morning, my daughter has like sprouted wheat bread, some scrambled eggs. She loves kimchi and sauerkraut, and fermented foods are so great for for blood sugar stability and for flavor. So anyway, we just scramble the eggs, add a little bit of spinach in there, and serve it with the sauerkraut and she likes kimchi better, but sauerkraut's usually easier for most people.
Yeah.
And that's like, you've got protein, you've got vegetables, you've got fermented foods, and it takes all of maybe 3 minutes to make a breakfast like that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be super time consuming, but there are things like overnight oats that as long as they're made with they've got the protein and the fiber, and we do that by using yogurt as the base or using a high protein plant milk as the base in the overnight oats, and then adding the seeds and the berries on top, which just adds a lot of flavor and texture. It makes it tastier, but it also makes it a better breakfast. And those are things that you can do ahead of time. And then there's a lot of just, grab and go type of options. It's really easy to add nuts and seeds to like a yogurt parfait. And whether that's dairy yogurt or a plant-based yogurt, if you can't have dairy, like having yogurt and throwing berries and nuts and seeds on top also takes 45 seconds,
Mhm.
So it doesn't always have to be really time consuming. And then I did a TV segment and I shared a cottage cheese breakfast bowl, which sounds a little strange, but it's like, cottage cheese, half cottage cheese and half Greek yogurt. And then you're adding flax and chia and mixing it together. And then you add like pears and walnuts and cinnamon and honey. And it's like got 30 grams of protein and 10 grams of fiber. And it takes 2 minutes. I made it on TV in 2 minutes, so
Wow.
you can do it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
This is a really cool, like you said, like this, like mind shift. Because everyone I know on Sunday, that's meal prep day. And like you said, though, it's all meal prep day for dinners. And this is a huge shift for me to be like, wow, what if I were to do a meal prep for my breakfast? I got to let this set in my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Because even if we did like the egg muffins in a pan, or if I had avocado ready to put on some egg tacos, and I'm leaning heavy into eggs here, but
I was going to say that is, Christopher and I just have done that for a while now, probably a couple of months, where every weekend I make like 16 hard-boiled eggs.
Yes, hard-boiled eggs, yes.
And then I make a big batch of chia seed pudding that we can both eat throughout the week. So it's literally just full-fat coconut milk and chia seeds.
Oh, coconut milk in it.
Yeah,
Smart.
and that's kind of it. And then we can add, like, I'll add like a tablespoon. So for a full Tupperware of it, I'll add like a tablespoon of maple syrup. But full-fat coconut milk is actually pretty sweet. And then we can top it with blueberries or bananas or whatever we want, like any kind of cherries or berries in the morning. And we'll sprinkle cinnamon on it. And that has helped us a lot, because those are still like, then you can eat 2 or 3 hard-boiled eggs. Yeah. And you just pull them out of your refrigerator and peel them. Or if you need to, you can always on the weekend for prep, like pre-peel them. And then you have them ready to go in Tupperwares if you just need to like grab and go to work. Yeah. And Deena, I like that seed blend you mentioned, because I'm thinking of people who are at work all day. Every work building I've ever worked in has some sort of employee lounge where they have a refrigerator. So it seems like you could keep a jar of that seed blend at work in your work refrigerator, and then you can just add it to like whatever you bring. So you could bring a bowl of chia seed pudding, or maybe of like an overnight oats, or maybe yogurt or something. Just pack something really quick in the morning and then get to work and sprinkle some of your nut and seed toppings on it. And then one of the other things we did that I haven't done as much recently, but that really helped us, was making like a breakfast hash. So at the end, like Sunday, I would shred up sweet potatoes, beets, stems from broccoli, because those are really good shredded, and you don't use them otherwise. Like most people don't like noshing. I like the stems of broccoli. Most people don't like noshing on them, but they're like one of the highest like vitamin C parts of the broccoli. So I would shred those up. I'd shred up an onion. I think that was basically
just put it in like 9x13 pan.
No, I would just shred them all, keep them in the fridge, and then when I made eggs in the morning, I just toss them in the skillet.
Oh, I love that.
So I would just cook them up in butter or avocado oil or something like that, and then add salt and pepper, and then it's like a breakfast hash, and then you just have your eggs, and then that's kind of an easy way to get.
I'm getting hungry, and this all sounds amazing.
Fast, like they're pre-prepped and they're shredded, so they cook fast in a pan.
Smart.
Those were some of mine.
Yeah. So I think there are ways to either prepare ahead of time, right? Where you're preparing a breakfast hash, a frittata, you're making breakfast burritos and you're freezing them, you're making egg muffins, there's lots of things that you can do ahead of time. But then there's also some things that are quick and grabbing and go, and everybody's just got to find what works for them. It's really just about making it a priority and then making it happen.
Yeah, I like that mind shift, because I do think, at least in America, we're very focused on breakfast being fast. Yeah. Like, I don't necessarily know where that originated, like why we have that need, but it's like every person I've talked to, in our mind, breakfast should be like a 5-minute thing or less.
Well, you're right. This is another mind shift. Slow down, enjoy breakfast.
Yeah. So like saying like, it could take you longer than it takes to make dinner because it's a more important meal is such a, I think, mind shift for our listeners.
Yeah.
For me too.
Yeah. And if it's an option for you, I mean,
Right.
if it's not, if your mornings are crazy and you have 500 things to do and kids to get out the door, then maybe that's, not an option except for on the weekends or something like that. But another really easy breakfast idea, if you have a good quality bread, that's because like a sprouted wheat bread or a sourdough bread or even a gluten-free one that's whole grain is going to have about 4 or 5 grams of protein and 3 or 4 grams of fiber. So you have 2 slices of that and you put almond butter or peanut butter on it. And then you put your berries. It looks really fun. Kids love doing it because you can like decorate it. You can make a smiley face with the blueberries and bananas, and then sprinkle on hemp seeds. That's another one with 2 slices and a glass of milk. You've got 30 grams of protein and 10 grams of fiber. So
awesome. That's an awesome.
Also another like under 2-minute breakfast that's super filling and nourishing and tasty.
And not to mention something it sounds like a lot of kids could make for themselves to take some of that burden off of parents who are trying to get ready for work in the morning.
Yes.
I like that idea of like optimizing breakfasts and helping kids learn how to help themselves early on, where they can make their own breakfast. Like that's one thing a kid could do in the morning if you have the kind of kid that gets up and isn't being dragged out of bed by their hair at like 5 minutes before the bus leaves. But
what I just had a thought. For breakfast time, do you have any thoughts on tea or coffee in the morning? Do you kind of play with either of those? Does it matter? What do you think?
Ooh, that is such a great question. So when it comes to any kind of caffeinated beverage, I really like to recommend that people have that with their meal rather than on its own. And that's because caffeine can do that same thing. It can raise our stress hormones, just like skipping breakfast can, when we have it on an empty stomach. So if you are going to have a cup of coffee or like green tea, black tea, some kind of caffeinated beverage in the morning, I would just recommend that people have it with their breakfast or like, around the time that they're eating breakfast, not like an hour before they're having breakfast. And I know that that's a really tough habit for a lot of people. They'll have their coffee and then they'll go exercise and then they'll shower and then they'll whatever. And if that works for you, then go for it. If you're feeling wired and tired, if you're dragging throughout the day, then maybe try this switch and it could help you just, feel better throughout the day. And then what was the other part of your question?
Just coffee and tea, just kind of all the thoughts you had about it.
Yeah. Oh, I do have a really good tip though. So one thing that you can do to boost the protein content, and I do this most mornings, is to add either collagen peptides or gelatin to your coffee and tea. So they're both pretty tasteless. They don't affect the flavor very much. And with collagen, it will dissolve in hot or cold. So if you have collagen peptides, you're going to get about 14 grams of protein from a scoop of that. Maybe 10. It kind of depends on the brand and the scoop size, but still like very easy to digest. You just sip it. It's already in your drink. And then with gelatin, it only dissolves in hot, but you have to dissolve in cold first. So you take a tablespoon of gelatin and put it in your mug, add 2 tablespoons of just cold water, like out of the tap, and mix it together. And then you put your tea bag in or your coffee, whatever your hot beverage is, you pour that over and it immediately dissolves. And you've got 11 to 14 grams of protein right there. So
as your beverage cools, does it turn into like Jell-O?
Absolutely.
I was like, I can picture it gelling up.
I mean, it would if you left it out at room temperature for like 2 hours or if you put it in the fridge.
So if somebody's a slow coffee drinker, they're not going to like end up drinking Jell-O at the end.
No. I mean, unless you like your coffee, you let it get cold, which who wants to drink that anyway, right?
Yes.
As long as it's still semi-warm, it will be absolutely liquid. And it's a really easy way to get more protein in. And just have like a guaranteed, I've got, at least 10 grams of protein here. And then you don't have to worry so much about your breakfast. It's such an easy hack.
That's so great.
Speaking of my meal prep this week, I meal prepped beef gelatin Jell-O. So I just did like ginger juice and lemon and a little honey and made that gelatin jello. And so my boy in the morning, I'll give him these little jello shots he has. And we like love it. A good little morning boost.
Yeah.
And it's delicious, by the way. And
Yeah.
and anti-inflammatory with the ginger.
And
So,
vitamin C with the lemon. And my
And
husband.
it's such a great way to go if you have, if you're having trouble eating in the morning or you don't have much of an appetite. It's just, it'll help a little bit.
My husband likes coffee first, and he usually is slow to get breakfast. So our compromise has, for like over a year or two, he's always put collagen, 2 scoops of collagen. I think it ends up with the 2 scoops being about 18 grams of protein. So he'll do that in his coffee, and that's kind of our like compromise on it, with like full fat milk. So he gets some of the fat too. So I love that hack. And I think a lot of people might not be aware of how easy that is. And you really, with the collagen in the coffee, even with 2 big scoops, like when you look at his coffee cup, it looks like so much powder in the bottom before he adds the coffee, but it all dissolves and you can't detect any of it. So I think that's such a good hack for people if you're going to have the coffee, to have the protein with it, and then to take some of the burden off of that meal too. So you're not so stressed out. Not that you should be stressed out, but you know what I mean? You're not like counting every gram of protein. Like, how am I going to do this?
Exactly. You don't have to eat 6 eggs.
Right. Exactly.
You have 2 eggs and a cup of coffee.
For individuals who like to practice time restricted eating, or what we often call intermittent fasting, how can having breakfast fit into that time schedule?
Yeah. Well, I think first it's important to remember that breakfast is really just the first meal of the day. So whenever you eat it, that's breakfast, right? But also that, delaying breakfast, skipping breakfast does lead to higher hunger hormones in the evening. It makes us more snacky, right? We have higher cravings. And then eating late at night can impact our sleep. It can impact our digestion, right? There's just a lot of things that happen as a domino of that. So I think having breakfast earlier in the day is a really good way to go. And for those that are practicing time restricted eating, you can still achieve that. You're just cutting your eating in the evening, which is a lot better for your health anyway. So if you're trying to get a 12-hour fast, then you stop eating at 7 o'clock and then you start eating at 7 in the morning. But that's even pretty early. Like if you wanted to extend that to 14, then you eat breakfast at 9 a.m. And that's still, you're getting a little bit longer fast, but it's still within that 2-hour window that's kind of optimal. So I think there's a lot of ways to do it. And then for people that are fasting for 16 or 18 hours, then you need to listen to the other episode, because not really a great idea, I think.
Yeah, especially.
I think people can just shift their clock and adjust when they're starting and stopping their fast, because when you stop it 3 hours before bed, that's going to be the best for your sleep, for digestion, for circadian rhythm, for feeling the most alert during the day, for falling asleep easily at night. So it's just a better way to go anyway. And breakfast really helps set the stage for that. If you're having a hard time feeling hungry for breakfast in the morning, you can set yourself like an eating curfew. Like, I'm not going to eat anything after 6 o'clock tonight. And within a day or two, you will wake up hungry. It's really just about that our body clocks are just so shifted that we're like, oh, I'm not hungry in the morning, but it's probably because you just ate really late at night, or you ate your biggest meal at 7 or 8 at night, and it's still digesting when you woke up at 8 in the morning. You don't get that fasting benefit. You don't get the digestive rest. So it's just like when you eat that big breakfast, it shifts all of your hunger, your whole appetite for the day, so that you get less and less and less hungry as the day goes on, which makes it easier to make better food choices. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I'm going to have like cookies and ice cream, it's probably at night, right? I don't want to do that for breakfast.
Right.
Almost never. Yes. So by eating a really healthy breakfast and just naturally being less hungry in the evening, you just naturally make better food choices without having to try or make rules for yourself, or, you know what I mean? It's just like such a great way to set yourself up for success, and it makes everything else easier.
Absolutely. And Deena is totally right. When I shifted from eating like following a time restricted pattern where I was eating my first meal of the day, closer to like 11 or 12, to having that first meal of the day within 2 hours of waking up, I really did start to become, within a few days, because I had told Deena that in our episode on fasting, I said, but I'm not hungry for breakfast in the morning. Like I literally don't get hungry until noon. But then I shifted. We were probably eating dinner around 7 and finishing around 8. And I wasn't sleeping that great either. So I shifted everything where now we eat our last meal of the day, probably around 5 is my goal, usually, unless we're at a friend's house or having people over. So we usually try to sit down eating by 5, done by 6, and then I'm having breakfast again in the morning by like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of our goal. And I really am like hungry,
Mm-hmm.
which I never thought I would be, but I really am.
It helps you eat a better breakfast, right? Because 30 grams of protein and 10 grams of fiber is a big meal. Like that's a meal. That is not a grab a piece of toast and a coffee and run out the door. Like you have to actually sit down and eat that much. That's quite a bit of food. It's a real meal, but it's so satisfying. And I bet, you feel really good throughout the morning, and you probably don't get hungry for lunch. A lot of us, when we have like a skimpy breakfast by 10 o'clock, we're like, oh my gosh, when is it lunch? And we're dragging, we're just like pulling ourselves through, but that energy isn't really coming from a place of like sustainable energy. It's like, caffeine energy, or it's just like stress energy. We're like, gotta make it, and it just feels so much better when you're like, like I've got all this fuel in the tank and I'm ready to go for the day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
I think we've already covered this in depth, but if you have any additional breakfast suggestions for people who can't have eggs, because that's one of the things we run into when somebody's following like an AIP protocol, or if they do food sensitivity testing and eggs come up as part of it. What are some good high protein options that people might enjoy for breakfast? And I know that it's like, I tell people too, like you could just eat leftovers from dinner, but then for some people, they're like, I can't go there yet. Like maybe they'll go there eventually, but they're not there yet. What are some good alternative options that are high in protein that don't have eggs?
Yeah. And there's some people that can't eat eggs, for whatever reason, or just you get tired of them. I think we all get tired of them because we're like, oh, we're trying to eat a healthy breakfast, so we're eating eggs. But we forget that there's actually a lot of other foods that are. So, I guess my first tip would just be expand your idea of what's okay to eat for breakfast, because you can eat anything for breakfast. So leftover soup, I think soups are really great for breakfast. And in a lot of countries like Japan, that is your typical breakfast, is a bowl of soup. So it's just like a silly mind thing that we put ourselves into these boxes. So leftovers are an option for sure. Meat and fish are also great options. Beans and legumes are great sources of protein and fiber. And I know people, might feel weird about that, but you can make like chickpea flour pancakes. You can, you could still make it like an American breakfast food that looks like what you want, but out of better ingredients. So that's one. And then, we have typical breakfast foods like bacon or sausage or, things like that. And then just making sure that you've got the veggies and for the fiber, or that you've got the fruit along with it, or the seeds. And the seeds are a really great option because they're the fiber and the protein together. So if somebody is following like AIP and they can't have dairy and they can't have eggs, I've got some recipes for like porridges that you can make that are nut and seed based, that are going to have the protein and the fiber. And you can add collagen peptides is a really easy one to add to porridges. Smoothies are a really quick and easy option. You just want to make sure it's got the protein and the fiber so that you're not sending yourself on a blood sugar roller coaster ride. So I think there are actually a lot of ideas still. And then that like almond butter toast that I mentioned, it would just have to be a bread that was like approved for whatever diet that person was on. But that's a really great and easy way that's not eggs. And then, if you do like eggs, then like avocado toast with an egg, or even avocado toast without an egg, also a great breakfast. So I think there's lots of options, and I've got like a little workbook with recipes.
And how do people access I think you mentioned a breakfast course. How do people access that course, and how can they access your workbook? Is that something we can put links in the show notes for people to find those materials, or how do they do that?
Absolutely. So I have a Better Breakfast workshop, and it's a pre-recorded workshop. So when you buy it, you get immediate access to it. And it's a presentation on like all of the, the biggest breakfast mistakes that people make, how to fix them, and then how to get protein and fiber. And then it has 30 breakfast recipes. A lot of them are plant-based, because those are the questions I get, like, what if I don't eat meat, or what if I don't want eggs, or whatever. And a lot of them are egg-free. So you're going to find a lot of options. And then I have high protein, dairy-free alternatives, if you can't have cheese, if you can't have milk, because those are really easy sources of protein, right? Yogurt, cottage cheese, milk, great sources of protein, and that are really quick and easy, but a lot of people can't have them. So I have a list of alternatives in that. And it's just on my website, therealfoodnutritionist.com. And it's just at the top, Better Breakfast Workshop.
I love it.
Okay, we'll link that also.
Yes. And you also work with clients as well, right? If any of our listeners want to get a hold of you, just on your website as well, they can contact you, and you work with people over the internet. So yeah.
I do. And I'll probably try to get you to fix your breakfast first.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything else goes better afterwards. And people are like, it seems so simple. It seems too simple to be that effective. But it is, because it affects your hormones, it affects your appetite, it affects your sleep, right? It is because it has that like domino, permeating effect on a lot of other things, and your food choices, what you're hungry for. It's just such a simple tool, but such a powerful one to nail your breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Inspiration.
That's a way. I know. I was like, I am inspired to do better.
Always.
And especially with my kids too. This is really having me dial in and kind of buttoning up what they eat for breakfast too. And anyway, yeah, this is inspiring.
Is there anything about breakfast, Deena, that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
That's a good question. I'm thinking. I don't think so.
We kind of covered the gamut.
We did pretty good.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
awesome. Good. Then we did it right.
We did it. Good.
You asked all the right questions.
Yes. Well, thank you again. And I really just think you are like this pillar of light and like hopefulness and food and eating for us and all of our families. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I love coming at it from, especially with breakfast and with kids, like coming at it from what are we trying to add in, rather than don't eat this, don't eat that, it's like,
yes.
I feel like that's all we ever hear in the nutrition and food space is like,
yeah,
do this and don't eat that, and that's bad for you, and blah, 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 and I think it's just so much more empowering to come from a place of like, what do I need to get in that's going to help me feel my best, and to know that there are a lot of choices so that everybody can choose what works for them. If they need fast and quick meals, if they need dairy-free, egg-free, whatever they need, you can build a breakfast out of the foods that work for you, that work for your gut, for your health. And it doesn't have to be about a list of, do's and don'ts.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So smart.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Deena. And we're gonna go eat our healthy lunch now. Well, we'll have to have a podcast now on lunch, but yeah, our second breakfast. But thank you for your knowledge. You're so good at this, and keep shining your light to the world. And we appreciate it.
We appreciate your time, Deena. Thank you so much.
And for our listeners, go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. you should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!